It has not even been a day since Jack Dorsey resigned as CEO of Twitter, and already Twitter has announced a new censorship policy that you cannot share photos or videos, media that they deem to be private. And why? They say, well, sharing private media, as they describe it, disproportionately affects women and minorities. We know that the CEO is particularly woke, and the reason he is replacing Jack Dorsey, one, Jack Dorsey resigned, but also they say Jack Dorsey was not moving fast enough. Could it be that Jack actually does believe in decentralized social media? He actually does believe in free speech, but he was standing up against a giant machine trying to churn the other direction, moving more left against free speech, and he served to slow it down? I don't know. I'm not going to pretend that Jack was doing anything or not doing anything because I think he was only a figurehead. I think they brought him in to represent the company as its founder, and he didn't really have that much impact. The new guy, Parag Agrawal, has already said they're not bound by the First Amendment. They're a global company, but you know what? Jack Dorsey said the same thing. The reality may be that Jack Dorsey was simply disinterested for the most part in Twitter, and he does agree with a lot of these policies. Now, I'll tell you why this is so bad. Twitter is the public square. It's where we share information. A lot of people probably aren't all that worried about it, saying I don't use Twitter, but this matters. Stories about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden censored by Twitter and Facebook, and other stories about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden censored on YouTube. If people, and this is according to Rasmussen and a few other pollsters, knew about what Joe Biden was doing with his son's businesses, things he was lying about, a large portion of people would not have voted for him. This absolutely affects our elections, but outside of elections and politics, it affects our ability to know. And this new policy is one of the most damning policies we've seen in a long time, if not ever. It basically says independent journalism is done. Why? You're out and you're filming someone and they do something and you're like, this is newsworthy. Well, Twitter's issued a clarification saying, well, if it's a large public event, we'll allow it. But it's their context. They decide. Think about Kyle Rittenhouse. The videos of him running through the streets. Now, Twitter says, oh, if it's a big public event or a protest, we're not going to take it down. But why should it even be a question of whether you could or would take it down? I'll tell you this. My belief is that if we get another Kyle Rittenhouse type situation and there are independent journalists on the ground filming, yeah, Twitter will take it down and say, look, this is showing images of private individuals without their consent. So gone. But of course, as we've already seen with James O'Keefe, the mainstream press, CNN in particular, will go to the home of a little old lady because she shared a meme, and they'll question her. They'll show her house. They'll show her identifying details. And Twitter and social media says, that's fine. James O'Keefe does quite literally the same thing, blurs out the address and questions an individual, and they say, you're doxing. We know how this game is played. We know where this is going. Now, of course, many people will say, Tim, I get that, but let's be real. The ratings for all these big fake news outlets are falling off a cliff. Yes, that may be true for the most part. That on television, Timcast IRL, the conversation podcast, we do at 8 p.m., check it out on YouTube, we do get substantially more viewers in the key demo than CNN does. I think CNN gets around 100,000 or so, maybe 200, and we're getting 500,000 or more in total key demo views from the live viewership to the VOD viewership. But what about on YouTube? With this big tech censorship, they are seeking to filter out independent voices, channels like this, to prop up CNN. And I have the data. Because a lot of people want to laugh and be like, CNN's ratings are gone. And then they look at the YouTube data and they're like, how are they getting 100 million views on one channel per month? Who watches this stuff? YouTube puts them on the front page. You see, the game is rigged. And over time, what they're seeking to do is eliminate channels like mine and force you to watch channels like Fox News, MSNBC, or CNN. That's right, Fox News as well. They stopped recommending a lot of my content a while ago and started recommending Fox News instead. Why? I'm not nearly as conservative as Fox News is, because Fox News is corporate press and they feel like they're safe to do it. But let's take a look at what's going on with the censorship, and we'll take a look at the corruption of CNN and why it's important independent voices remain strong and are able to share the news. Before we get started, Head over to timcast.com, become a member. Why? Because censorship is coming. I've been saying it for a long time. They've taken down some of my videos. They've outright banned many people off these platforms. So we built timcast.com. We have an editorial team reporting on news about like Dave Chappelle and the Maxwell trial and all that stuff. And if you want to support that journalism, become a member. If you want exclusive members only podcasts from all of our shows, become a member. If you just want to support the work I'm doing here right now, calling out the censorship and challenging the establishment, become a member. Share the show with your friends. Tell your friends and family members to sign up. Help support our work. It is greatly appreciated. But don't forget, hit that like button right now on this video. Subscribe to this channel and take the URL. Share it wherever you can. That's the marketing power we have. YouTube is going to put CNN on the front page. They're going to get 100 million views, and that is money. 100 million views, man. How much CNN probably makes off of YouTube just giving them the front page position? Let's do some math. 100 million views, they could be getting $400,000 to $800,000 per month for free because YouTube just puts them on the front page. We don't have that power. In fact, we have the opposite. We get shadow banned. We get knocked off these websites. Sharing this video whenever you get the chance. And other channels too, be it Crowder or Styx, I always shout them out. Or even some progressives you might like, you always got to share because I would take a populist, independent personality over the corporate press any day. You got to be active in this culture war in sharing content to the best of your abilities. But let's talk about what's going to happen with Twitter censorship. And this is why I say share what you can when you can, because sooner or later you won't be able to. A lot of people complain to me when they say, Tim doesn't even show the images or the videos from these big major events. And I'm like, why do you think my channel still exists and others have been taken down? Yeah, there is a real challenge in trying to hold the center and maintain a position on YouTube. So I say, look, I could show you certain images from the nights in question, and we'll put them up on Timcast IRL or on the website. But the way we're fighting the good fight for free speech now is we're accepting where we've lost areas in this battlefield, certain things that YouTube will ban you for. And then we're letting people know, look, our website covers the news without censorship. So if you want to just read the news and maybe feel like we're not covering something, just check the website. Because we did a really long segment, half an hour, members only show about the Maxwell trial. And we're working on a lot of data about this. So we'll probably have big articles. We'll probably put these clips up free for all the members on the website. But ultimately, we can't rely on YouTube. We can't rely on Twitter. We can't rely on Facebook. Here's the news. Twitter bans sharing photos, videos of people without their consent. Well, how do you do news then? The social media site may allow images if they're newsworthy, but says it'll try to assess the context. There it is. Context will always favor the ideologues they support. Twitter on Tuesday banned the sharing of photos and videos of private individuals without their consent, the company said in a blog post. The update to its private information policy notes that people can contact the microblogging platform to have such media removed. The ban doesn't apply to public figures if the media and tweet are of public interest, but content featuring those people may be removed if the site determines it's been shared to harass, intimidate, or use fear to silence them. Now, I'll pause for a second. To a certain degree, I get it. And I understand the idea, and it ain't all that bad. If you're a Leonardo DiCaprio, and you're sitting in your backyard minding your own business, and some paparazzo takes a picture of you sunbathing, like, dude, that's not okay. That's private. You want to get somebody walking down the street, I get it, but people do this creepy stuff. The problem is they give themselves this power. They use an argument about reasonableness, like, what if you, public figure, were just trying to go for an ice cream cone and people started filming and harassing you and insulting you and screaming at you? It's like once once you accept the premise, they then turn around and say, okay, ban all their content. Thanks for giving us the power without question. No, that's why we say, sorry, if you're in the public, we can film you. There have been people saying, tweeting at me like, well, now you can get all those videos of you removed. And I'm like, no, like joking. I'm like, oh yeah, of course. But of course not. First of all, I don't think Twitter would even grant me that respect. They go on to say, quote, we will always try to assess the context in which the content is shared. And in such cases, we may allow the images or videos to remain on the service. If the image or video is publicly available, is being covered by news outlets, or adds value to the public discourse, it may be allowed to remain on the site, Twitter said. In its blog post, the company points out that people might share images of private individuals in a crisis situation to help them, and that could outweigh the safety risks. The move is an expansion of Twitter's private information policy that the company says is meant to protect people from physical or emotional harm. Woo! I love it. Emotional harm. You cannot protect people from emotional harm. Some people are harmed emotionally by watching a movie about a dog saving a rabbit. And they're like, this is just making me feel bad. Like, oh, I'm so worried, you know. But what about the other animal that needed to eat the rabbit? Who knows what's going to make someone freak out? Physical harm we get. Don't hurt people. Emotional harm? That's nebulous. It's abstract. It's impossible. The policy already bars Twitter users from sharing people's home addresses, government IDs, and other sensitive information. Twitter says sharing someone's age or job or sharing screenshots of text messages doesn't violate its rules. The company also has a separate policy that bars users from posting nude photos of people without their consent. Look, I get that stuff. To report someone for violating this policy, Twitter users can click on the 3 dots in the upper right corner of the rule-breaking tweet, select report tweet, click on its abusive or harmful, and select includes private information. So let me just actually jump to the Twitter safety rules, because the media launders the narrative and buries the context. What Twitter's actually said, I think, is a bit more interesting than that. From their website, expanding our private information policy to include media. Now, I want to give you the context here, and then we'll come back to read this because I don't want to just bury you in policy. From Fox Business, new Twitter CEO Parag Agrawal once said the company is not to be bound by the First Amendment. They say Agrawal, who was Twitter's chief technology officer until the social media board unanimously appointed him to replace Dorsey, was quickly praised by his successor. He's been my choice for some time. We've recently learned about a strategy to hit ambitious goals. And I believe that strategy to be bold and right, but our critical challenge is how we work to execute it against and deliver results. Yeah. We get it. Ironically, Agrawal now oversees a company that is infamous for helping cancel culture ruin careers of public figures who sent pre-famed tweets that were not simply the quote of a comedian. It's just wild that Twitter didn't wipe or at least spot check the new CEO's past tweets, considering how often tweets get resurfaced. Now, there's some important context. This guy tweeted out a quote from Asif Manvi of The Daily Show, in where he said, if they're not going to differentiate between Muslims and terrorists, why would I differentiate between white people and racists? It was a quote. A lot of conservatives pointed it out and said it was bad. And then some leftists and establishment media people were like, conservatives aren't being honest with you about the context here. I tweeted out simply saying, LOL. Thought it was a funny quote. That's it. And I thought people should see it. No, I didn't. I knew it was a quote, but ultimately I didn't put any context or opinion in what I said other than it made me laugh. But the reality is, this is a guy who's tweeting out political statements from Asif Manvi. This is a guy who said we're not to be bound by the First Amendment. This is a guy who, like Jack Dorsey, is insinuating our goal is to be a global company. The values of the United States, for which your company was founded in, are not the same as, say, the Soviet Union or India or, South Africa, for instance, or Kenya. And thus, there is no global standard. Quote, our role is not to be bound by the First Amendment, but our role is to serve a healthy public conversation, and our moves are reflective of things that we believe lead to a healthier public conversation, Agrawal said in a 2020 interview. This is with Technology Review's editor-in-chief, Gideon Litchfield. The kinds of things that we do about this is focus less on thinking about free speech, but think about how the times have changed and, how they have changed. Let me explain to you how they've changed by going back to Twitter's website. They say, there are growing concerns about the misuse of media and information that is not available elsewhere online as a tool to harass, intimidate, and reveal the identities of individuals. Sharing personal media such as images or videos can potentially violate a person's privacy and may lead to emotional or physical harm. The misuse of private media can affect everyone, but can have a disproportionate effect on women, activists, dissidents, and members of minority communities. When we receive a report that a tweet contains unauthorized private media, we will now take action in line with our range of enforcement options. While our existing policies and Twitter rules cover explicit instances of abusive behavior, this update will allow us to take action on media that is shared without any explicit abusive content, provided it's posted without the consent of the person depicted. This is part of our ongoing work to align our safety policies with human rights standards, and it will be enforced globally starting today. Let me stress that. They say it will allow them to take action on media that is shared without any explicit abusive content, so long it's posted without the consent of the person depicted. A lot of people like sharing videos of me without my consent. Should I not just be like, okay, purge them all? Unless I give you consent on my videos, you are causing me emotional harm. It's crazy, isn't it? And the fact that they say it's going to affect activists more, we know what they're basically saying. When the Hunter Biden story came out, well, actually, let me show you this right here. There's a new rule. New. Media of private individuals without permission of the person depicted. That's it. That's it. Media of a private individual without the permission of the person depicted. Define private. Were the Covington kids private individuals? Maybe. And then you could say, hey, take this video down. Maybe that's why they're trying to address this. But are they likely going to defend right-wingers and MAGA individuals? Of course not. We know that's not how the game is played. Let me show you. From the New York Post, Miranda Devine writes, media helped hide the real Joe Biden by censoring Hunter stories. Now, this is not just social media. This is media in general. She writes, the president's plummeting popularity, especially among independents, reflects a growing realization among voters that Joe Biden is not the man who they thought they had voted for. There's a good reason for their disenchantment. They were denied the normal due diligence the media is supposed to conduct on presidential candidates. It's been more than a year since the Post established the first of a series of damning stories about then-candidate Biden based on material of his son Hunter's laptop. It's been more than a year since Facebook and Twitter colluded with Democrat-friendly media to censor a story that reflected badly on their preferred candidate less than 3 weeks before the election. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey blithely admitted after the election that locking the Post's account for 2 weeks on the basis of a non-existent hacking offense was a mistake. Facebook has never revealed the results of the fact check it used as pretext for blocking the Post. It likely never occurred because Facebook never contacted key recipients of emails we published from the laptop. But the damage was done. The coordinated censorship of America's oldest newspaper, with more than 80 million readers online alone, amounted to election interference. And am I supposed to assume they're sad about that? No, I don't think so. Now, they've tried to issue their clarifications, which I did mention before. They're saying, look, it can affect dissidents and all that stuff. And they say images and videos that show people participating in public events like protests, sporting events, would generally not violate this policy. Generally. That means it will. It means they're just worried about a backlash right now from those who support free speech. In a tweet from Andy No, he says, Twitter support needs to clarify what this new policy specifically applies to. The policy, as I read it, gives arbiters at Twitter the ability to determine on a case-by-case basis what is in the public interest and what is not. The policy will be abused to silence journalists. Well, not Democrat ones. It's not going to silence any leftist ones. I mean, for the most part, it's likely just going to silence people like, Andy No. Twitter news, how Twitter's new woke CEO, Parag Agrawal, will be paid a $12 million bonus to speed up changes such as Bitcoin payments, moderations by users, and targeted ads after investors said Jack Dorsey moved too slowly. All right. Bitcoin payments? Okay. That's good news. That's great news. The price of Bitcoin will probably start going up as more adoption occurs, and I like that idea. Jack Dorsey, I guess, was too slow on that front. Moderations by users. Interesting. I'd be curious to see what their plan is. Minds.com, MINDS.com, has a jury system, probably the smartest plan for dealing with content, rule violations. Here's how it works. You post something on Minds and someone says, hey, that's bad, so I'll flag it. It then goes to a panel of jurors who will all vote on whether or not they believe the content is actually violating any rules. Isn't that smart? There's no, for the most part, the judge, the company, doesn't determine whether or not to remove it. They determine whether or not users randomly selected want it removed. The Daily Mail says, as of Monday, Parag Agrawal, 37, has been promoted to, we understand. The move was effective immediately. Investors were critical of Twitter's slow growth, blaming Dorsey's slow decision-making and hope that Agrawal could foster speedier improvements. He joined in 2011, this we get. His Agrawal, worth $1.52 million, will receive an annual salary of $1 million, plus bonuses and stock units valued at $12.5 million to make decisions and implement them faster. A $1 million salary. What is that? Is that $83,333? Am I getting my math wrong? 83 and then 2 and I think I might be getting my math wrong. I don't know. It's probably around there somewhere. $80,000 a month or so. Wow. That's a lot of money. I suppose, though, for a CEO, it's not all that much money. But what do you think happened after they appointed this guy? The investors were upset. Let me show you. Twitter stock is down in the past 5 days, 7.2%. Bravo, Twitter. When this guy came out, when the words emerged that he had said about not being bound by the First Amendment, we get it, but people start getting worried that this guy's not going to know what he's doing. Now, when Jack Dorsey, this is hilarious, reminds me of Futurama. When Jack Dorsey announced that he was resigning, Twitter went from $47 per share up to $51.88 per share. Huge spike. You ever see the Futurama episode where they're trying to sell Planet Express and it's owned by Farnsworth, the old guy? The 80s guy CEO is maybe a bit esoteric, but it's funny. So anyway, the actual CEO who's driven the stock price up, he was a new guy who came in, ends up dying. He's an 80s guy. And so then Fry, the main character, is like, I'm going to be handing over this company to a man of, merit, and the stock price is skyrocketing behind him, a distinguished professor, and then it goes way up. It's like Hubert Farnsworth, and then Farnsworth is shown to be like a doddering old fool, and the price just collapses to like 3 cents or something. This is what it reminds me of. Jack Dorsey's like, I'm going to be quitting. And everyone's like, yay! And then the stock skyrockets. And then Parag Agrawal is like, and I'll be taking over. And then they go, oh, and then it just spikes straight down. Look at this. Before the announcement that Dorsey was leaving, it was floating about $47. Now it's at $43 because censorship is bad across the board. But let's talk about how bad it gets. Let me show you how bad it gets. We have the story, of course, that you've seen. Media helped hide the real Joe Biden by censoring Hunter stories. The key thing here is that Miranda Devine mentions that Facebook and Twitter colluded with Democrat-friendly media to hide the real Hunter and Joe Biden. Let me show you Social Blade. A lot of people, as I mentioned earlier in the segment, want to celebrate and cheer because CNN's ratings are in the gutter. Now, of course, we can see that we have this here. January 5th, 2021, CNN had a spike. They went from 50 million views to 110 million views. As of right now, in the past 30 days, CNN, wait, what? Total views weekly. Why is it these numbers are off? Anyway, look, the hard metric. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Am I looking at something wrong? It says here CNN in 1 week in November got 24 million. Yes, right. That's correct. 24 million views because they've made 100 million views in 1 month. This 100 million number, 110 million was not 1 month. It was a week. In 1 week in January, of course, January 6th, 100 million views. 100 million. CNN averages 3.415 million views per day. They get 3,333 subscribers per day. That's big. CNN is doing really well on YouTube because YouTube is propping them up. YouTube puts them on the front page. And that's the disadvantage that we all have. And let me show you the depravity of CNN. You may be familiar with the CNN scandal. Legal Insurrection writes, Chris Cuomo reportedly uses media resources to get info on his brother's accusers. I'll simplify that story for you. Andrew Cuomo, Democrat governor from New York, who used the fact that his brother is on CNN to lie and manipulate, and it's insane, actually got assistance from his media CNN personality brother to help him with the allegations against him. His brother was actually not only trying to write the response, the PR response, which is insane, considering he works for CNN, but also was seeking to stalk the accusers, the victims of Andrew Cuomo. That happened. And what happens next? Did they fire the guy? No. Dave Weigel, not a fan. He's written fake news before, and I've called him out on it. He says, if some news channel intern did what Chris Cuomo did, they'd have been fired 1 second after these docs were published. Look at this. He has the story from CNN itself. CNN to conduct thorough review of documents showing Chris Cuomo's intimate role advising brother Andrew Cuomo. Written by Brian Stelter, Oliver Dorsey, and Sonia Mogue. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Mogue. This is CNN reporting on their own internal conflict, and that's It's fair. I think your media reporters covering CNN is fine. But, I find this interesting. Brian Stelter, what's his attitude? He's come out and he's mentioned the story, sure. But take a look at this. Dan Kennedy said, well, now, not only is Chris Cuomo on tonight, but he's talking about Omicron as if there was nothing else for him to address. Brian Stelter says, for what it's worth, when Chris Cuomo addressed his actions on the air back in August, he said, this will be my final word on it. And he hasn't addressed the matter on TV since. Bravo, CNN. Corruption. Absolute corruption. Stephen Miller says, look at the shameless-ish. Stelter talking about Cuomo like they don't share office space. A political PR operation, not a news network. Good boy, Brian. March on out there and defend CNN's honor. And he does. Don Lemon also did the same thing. You're one of the kindest people on the planet. Don Lemon's fawning handoff to under-fire CNN co-host Cuomo was branded nauseating after Chris lied about the extent of his involvement in Brother Andrew's scandal. CNN is not news. You can argue that CNN is comparable to my channel or website or any other one. Fine, sure. I've got political opinions and I do an opinion show and I have no problem saying that. But CNN, the most trusted name in news, propped up on the front page, establishment political positions, supporting the narrative. This is the importance of a free and open internet. YouTube is going to put CNN on the front page. They're going to give them preferential treatment and access. CNN is going to keep lying. They're going to prop up really awful people like the Cuomos. And channels like mine will get shadow banned and relegated to the corners. And YouTube's attitude is probably like, you don't ban them outright. It'll create a backlash, but slowly just excise them so that in 10 years, all that remains is CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. And maybe not even Fox News, depending on what they choose to promote. I think the idea they have is these are the corporate cable channels, and it's what we want. And we want to, bring everything back together. I'll admit there's a big problem with social media in that it allows a wedge to be driven between people to a great degree. We have two different realities. People who watch the mainstream media and believe nonsense, and people who get the truth because they investigate on their own and fact check things. Some people might fact check on their own a bit too far and then end up reading nonsense and believing conspiracy theories because that's not fact checking, but you get wrapped up in that stuff. But for the most part, people who are discerning, who read the news and watch the videos, have an idea of what's really going on. And here's the scary scenario. The machine is churning in one direction. With Twitter's announcement, the direction is that independent reporting and media will not be allowed to function. And of course, it'll be like grandfathering you in. So are they going to go after Andy Ngo? Some people have pointed out that not being allowed to share a private individual's, information means you can't determine what is newsworthy unless CNN does. So they'll argue, Andy Ngo's doxing. He posted a video of someone in Portland or whatever. And Ngo's a journalist. But CNN has to publish it. If CNN publishes it, then it's newsworthy. It'll be interesting to see how they implement this. What I can just publish on timcast.com and then screen grab it and put it on YouTube and be like, it's already on my own website, publicly available with millions of views. Is that the game that's going to be played? I think they'd still go after me or anybody else. The ultimate goal, I shouldn't say YouTube, I should say Twitter. The ultimate goal is one by one. They are turning the knob one degree at a time towards hard left corporate establishment media narrative. And that's the problem. I certainly agree social media is divisive and it's driven a wedge between people creating two different realities and it's horrifying. But it's driving people towards the matrix, the fake reality, the insane lies. And we don't want to go there. We just want everyone to be functioning and knowing the truth. If people knew the truth, they'd make better decisions and the world would function way better. It's a fact. There are powerful people, however. Powerful people who want to lie to you, to take power from you, to convince you to do things that you probably shouldn't do, like give away your resources, give away your money, or not stand up for yourself. There are people who said, here's a good example. When Let's Go Brandon was going viral, there were a bunch of conservatives who said, it's a bad meme, don't use it, because no one knows what it means. These people are not bad people. These are a lot of good people I know and have had on Timcast IRL saying this. And I said, Let's Go Brandon as a meme forces people to ask the question, why is this being said? So when they hear people chanting, Let's Go Brandon, they say, what does that mean? If they hear people chanting F Joe Biden, they're going to be like, I get it. And they're going to ignore it. But having to go online and look something up or ask someone might spark a conversation. So it was a brilliant meme. That's what we need to be careful of. Being discouraged, refusing to stand up. But most importantly, the issue is that it's not so much about the individual saying it's a bad meme. Maybe it's not a perfect example. It's that on social media, they're going to slowly push you. Not instantly, not right off the bat, but they're going to slowly push you into the area they want you to be, to only report the things they want reported, to only comment on the things they want commented on. Without Twitter or YouTube or Facebook and a free press, well, we're going to end up living under the boot of lies. We'll all be wrapped up in that matrix. And maybe they can't win, though. Maybe there's too many people who have woken up to what's going on. They're challenging the lies. They're challenging the manipulation. They're seeing through it all. When they say, no, we're not going to, we'll never ship people from, their homes to these Australian quarantine camps, and then they do. Right now in Australia, here's a good example. The government is claiming that I'm lying because they explicitly stated they were having the military take people from their homes in an area called Binjari to a quarantine camp. They said it was conspiracy theories, but it's their own words. People who aren't allowed to leave their house to eat in Australia are then told, either taken by force or voluntarily, as they call it, even though I say it's insane. They say you can't leave your house, not even to eat, not even to get food. And then they come and offer you a ride to a quarantine camp where they'll feed you? A lot of people will be like, please, I'm hungry and I can't leave my house. They'll take that deal. How do we know about this stuff? Social media. How do we know about what's going on with the Uyghur Muslims? Social media. Give it 10 or 20 years. They're homogenizing this machine. It's kind of crazy. The internet used to be so much bigger, Now it's like, what, just Facebook and Google? It's hard to know what'll happen, but the censorship will get worse. So go to timcast.com, support our work, and go over to youtube.com/timcastirl, subscribe, because we'll have another segment. The live show is coming up at 8 p.m. And I know we're on YouTube, same as everybody else. I get it, because we want to hold this ground as long as possible. That's why we're promoting timcast.com. Check it out at 8 p.m., youtube.com/timcastirl. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all then.